Hello and welcome to Weekly News Highlights. Let's begin with keywords that made headlines this week. President Lee Jae-myung this week made his first diplomatic trip since taking office. He sat down for talks with leaders from Japan, the UK, and the United Nations on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Canada. U.S. President Donald Trump says he has not yet decided whether the U.S. military will join Israel's attacks on Iran, keeping the world guessing over his next move. Tensions continue to escalate as Iran's supreme leader says his nation will not surrender to anyone. North Korea has now decided to send thousands of construction workers to Russia to help rebuild the country's war-torn region in the latest sign of a growing alliance between the two sides. This week, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung attended the G7 summit in Canada, his first overseas trip since taking office. To walk us through the key takeaways from his three-day visit, our presidential office correspondent Song Yujin joins us in the studio today. Welcome, Yujin.
Great to be here, Sujin.
So, Yujin, let's begin with the significance of this trip. There was uncertainty at first whether President Lee Jae-myung will attend at all.
That's right, Sujin. There were a lot of questions about President Lee's attendance because this trip came just 12 days after he took office, making this the fastest overseas debut by any South Korean president. Now, for comparison, it took former President Yoon Suk-yeol 49 days, Moon Jae-in 51 days, and Park Geun-hye 70 days. But despite the tight timeline, President Lee at the end did make the decision to attend. So here's what he told reporters aboard the Air Force One.
국제사회에 대한민국이 신속하게 정상화됐다는 것을 좀 보여주는 게 필요하다라는 의견도 있었고 또 앞으로는 우리가 국제사회가 협력할 분야가 상당히 많은데 좀 무리하더라도 일찍 접촉하는 게 낫겠다는 의견들이 많아서
As many of our viewers may know, South Korea experienced a period of stalled diplomacy for about 6 months after former President Yoon Suk-yeol's martial law debacle last December.
So it was certainly a meaningful debut, so let's turn to the results. So while he delivered remarks at the G7's expanded session, much attention was on his bilateral meetings. So let's start with Tuesday's summit with Japan.
Sure, that was indeed the highlight and one of the most anticipated meetings for President Lee's trip, especially after a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump fell through after the American leader returned to Washington early due to what was going on in the Middle East. However, President Lee did meet with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, marking their very first summit.
우리나라에서는 일본과 한국과의 관계를 가깝고도 먼 나라라고 호칭합니다. 마치 안마당을 같이 쓰는 이웃집처럼 우리는 뗄래야 뗄 수 없는 관계에 있습니다. 오늘을 계기로 한국과 일본이 미래지향적으로 좀 더 나은 관계로 발전하기를 진심으로 기대합니다.
I truly hope that marking the 60th anniversary of normalized diplomatic ties, exchanges will grow not just between our two governments and businesses, but also between our people. I look forward to Korea and Japan working together in a way that contributes more to the region and to the world.
So during this 30-minute meeting, the two leaders reaffirmed their commitment to regular summit-level meetings while agreeing to strengthen trilateral coordination with the United States, now particularly in responding to regional geopolitical challenges, including North Korea. Also, a senior presidential office official told reporters the talks were held in a positive, friendly atmosphere, and both leaders expressed interest in frequent reciprocal visits.
So aside from Japan, President Lee also met with other world leaders during his trip.
You're right. So President Lee did hold a flurry of bilateral meetings. So throughout his trip, he held one-on-ones with 9 other heads of state, plus UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Now, among the G7 members, he met with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney.
The leaders of South Korea and the UK agreed to move forward on updating their post-Brexit FTA. They also discussed working together on Korean Peninsula, peace and security.
So in his summit with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, Lee emphasized defense cooperation, especially mentioning the participation of Korean companies in Canada's submarine acquisition program, with contracts expected to be finalized by 2028. President Lee also held summits with the leaders of South Africa, Australia, Brazil, Mexico, India, and the European Union, where economic cooperation was high on the agenda. Now, throughout all these bilateral meetings, the presidential office says President Lee prioritized building personal rapport and pragmatic diplomacy.
President Lee engaged comfortably with all the leaders, drawing on his prior knowledge of their personal backgrounds, political careers, and governing philosophies, while also using his trademark humor to build rapport.
In virtually every bilateral meeting, there were focused discussions on advancing practical cooperation in areas like trade, investment, supply chains, and energy, aimed at delivering real benefits for the Korean economy and businesses.
Right, so beyond the bilateral meetings, President Lee also delivered remarks at the G7's expanded session. What were the key takeaways there?
Right, so the expanded session President Lee participated in, the theme was energy security, where the president delivered 2 speeches. In his first address, he outlined South Korea's commitment to strengthening the global energy supply chain, which he described as being key to global economic growth and prosperity. And in his second speech, the president shared the country's policy direction on integrating AI and energy. He also detailed plans to boost energy efficiency through low-power AI semiconductors known as NPUs, and to encourage greater private sector involvement through tax incentives, regulatory reform, and the creation of a public investment fund. President Lee also invited global leaders to take part in the APEC summit in Gyeongju later this year, where South Korea will present a roadmap for international cooperation on AI.
Right, so this seems like a very strong start, but there's still a major task left, a meeting with President Trump. Do you have any updates on when this might happen?
Well, that is indeed the big question, because the canceled summit with U.S. President Donald Trump initially drew a lot of attention, especially with 25% reciprocal tariffs set to take effect if South Korea fails to reach a deal with the United States by July 8th. Now, according to a senior top office official, talks are ongoing to arrange a meeting at another multilateral engagement. And one possibility is the upcoming NATO summit.
So we will be watching that closely. Thank you so much for the wrap-up today, Yujin.
Always a pleasure.
This week, Seoul and Tokyo celebrate 60 years of normalizing diplomatic relations. The Japanese embassy in Seoul held a reception to celebrate the milestone with the theme of Hand in Hand Towards a Better Future. President Lee Jae-myung emphasized this message. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Seung has more.
From historic highs and lows, South Korea and Japan are pledging to move forward, hand in hand towards a better future. That was the message from President Lee Jae-myung and senior diplomats as both nations marked 60 years since normalizing bilateral relations. On Monday, the Japanese embassy in Seoul hosted the reception to mark the milestone, reflecting on the 1965 Treaty on Basic Relations, signed 20 years after Korea's liberation from Japanese colonial rule at the end of World War II. They also agreed on economic cooperation and a claim settlement, under which Japan provided $300 million in grants and $200 million in loans over 10 years. Over the past 6 decades, annual trade between the two neighbors has surged from just $200 million to around $70 billion last year, a 350-fold increase. And people traveling between the two countries, numbering around 10,000 in 1965, has now surpassed 12 million a year. But history remains a sensitive fault line. Japan's wartime forced labour, its sexual enslavement of so-called comfort women, and territorial disputes have long fueled friction, which spiralled in 2019 into a full-blown diplomatic and trade standoff. The Yoon Suk-yeol government moved to mend ties, restoring reciprocal visits between the leaders and strengthening trilateral cooperation with the United States. President Lee Jae-myung has signalled continued engagement, speaking via video due to his trip to Canada to attend the G7 summit.
격변하는 국제 정세 속에서 우리 양국은 함께 대응 방안을 모색해야 하는 중요한 파트너입니다.
Japan's ambassador Mitsushima Koichi said the two nations should now build new momentum for the decades ahead and emphasize the importance of trilateral ties with the US. Japan's special advisor to the Prime Minister Nagashima Akihisa, who also heads the Japan-Korea Parliamentarians Union, called for broader cooperation.
expanding bilateral communication and cooperation is no longer a choice, but a necessity. This applies across various sectors, including security, economy, energy, technology, and culture.
The commemorations will continue on Thursday in Tokyo, where Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is set to attend a corresponding reception hosted by the Korean Embassy. But first, President Lee and Prime Minister Ishiba could well hold their first meeting on the sidelines of the G7 summit. Seong, Arirang News.
Israel launched an attack on an Iranian state broadcaster Monday evening, stopping a live broadcast.
آنچه که ملاحظه کردید، صدایی که شنیدید، فضای غبارآلود استادیوم.
The airstrike came an hour after Israel issued a warning for the area of Tehran where the station was located. The station later said that the building was hit by 4 bombs. Israel's defense minister confirmed the attack, saying that they will strike the Iranian dictator everywhere. Iran's foreign ministry quickly condemned the attack, calling it a wicked act that constitutes a war crime as it targeted journalists. As Washington deliberates its role in the conflict between Israel and Iran, global attention is on the unfolding development and the potential for further escalation. Our Moon Hye-ryun has the details.
U.S. President Donald Trump kept the international community on edge with an ambiguous response to whether Washington would join Israel's military campaign against Iranian nuclear sites. Speaking to reporters at the White House on Wednesday local time, he said that he had yet to make a final call and he would hold off doing so for now.
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due, because things change. I mean, especially with war. Things change with war. It can go from one extreme to the other.
Shortly afterwards, he convened a second White House Situation Room meeting in as many days to discuss the agenda with his national security advisors. The talks lasted for around an hour, and it is not yet clear what was discussed or whether any decisions were made. According to the Wall Street Journal, Trump told senior aides late Tuesday that he had approved plans for a potential military strike on Iran, but decided to pause, hoping Tehran might still give up its nuclear program. Earlier in the day, Trump claimed that Iran had proposed to come to the White House to begin negotiations, and once again called for unconditional surrender. In response, Iran's diplomatic mission to the United Nations in New York hit back on social media by saying that no Iranian official has asked to grovel at the gates of the White House, followed by a message from Iran's supreme leader himself.
The Iranian nation stands firm against the imposed war, as it has stood so far, and stands firm against the imposed peace. The Iranian nation will not surrender to anyone in the face of imposition.
In the meantime, Israel downgraded its domestic security level on the assessment that Tehran's retaliatory capabilities have weakened after days of intense airstrikes. Israeli authorities have also begun operating return flights for Israeli citizens abroad, while other nations move to evacuate their own nationals from Israel. The U.S. State Department has started pulling out non-essential diplomats and is arranging evacuation flights and ships for American citizens, while China is also working to evacuate its citizens. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
North Korea is sending thousands of military personnel to help rebuild a Russian city damaged by its war with Ukraine. The deployment marks a new phase in Pyongyang's deepening partnership with Moscow, one that now extends beyond the battlefield. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jung-sil has the story.
North Korea is sending thousands of military construction workers to Russia's Kursk region, including 5,000 construction workers to rebuild damaged infrastructure and 1,000 sappers to clear the area of landmines. The decision was announced by Russia's top security official Sergei Shoigu after he met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang on Tuesday afternoon, their second meeting in just 2 weeks.
It's a gesture of brotherly support from the North Korean people and their leader, Kim Jong-un.
North Korea is believed to have already sent some 12,000 combat troops to Russia's Kursk region since October. South Korean intelligence says around 600 have been killed, with total casualties nearing 4,700. Analysts say Pyongyang's support isn't without strings, and it's likely expecting a payoff.
North Korea will likely get advanced systems like the Panzer air defense weapon and reconnaissance satellite technology.
Professor Kim added that Pyongyang will also likely receive oil and food supplies in return, crucial support as it struggles under sanctions and isolation. Other analysts say the visit also reflects shared concerns over Washington's recent signals regarding the situation in the Middle East.
With Trump doubling down on saying Iran must never get nuclear weapons, Russia may be reassuring North Korea, which has taken real risks for Moscow and still wants full recognition as a nuclear power.
Pyongyang gave no details on the new deployment, but said the two sides exchanged views on global and regional issues and reached full consensus. A South Korean presidential office official on Wednesday called the deployment concerning and said Seoul does not support it. Earlier, the foreign ministry said the employment of North Korean workers abroad violates UN Security Council resolutions and called on Pyongyang and Moscow to halt their cooperation. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
For the first time under the Lee administration, South Korea, the United States, and Japan held combined air drills on Wednesday morning in waters off the southern part of Jeju Island. This also marked the first joint air exercises since January. 2 South Korean F-15K fighter jets, 6 U.S. F-16S, and 2 Japanese F-2S participated. The drills were conducted to boost trilateral security cooperation to deter North Korea's advancing nuclear and missile threats, the Air Force said, and added that it plans to continue three-way drills on the back of a firm Seoul-Washington alliance. South Korea has drawn up its first extra budget under the brand new government with the ultimate goal of stimulating economic recovery. The budget also includes cash handouts to all citizens. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon has this report.
The second round of a supplementary budget bill this year, the first of its kind under Lee Jae-myung's presidency, has been drafted and is set to go to the National Assembly next week. President Lee, presiding over a cabinet meeting on Thursday, took a final look.
작년 12월 3일 이후로 심리적 위축이 심해서 있던 손님도 얼마 안 되던 손님도 다 떨어져 나갔다고 현장에서 너무 어려워합니다. 다행히 최근에는 조금 분위기가 개선되고 있긴 한데 어쨌든 본질적으로 우리 서민들이 겪는 고통이 매우 큰 것 같아요. 국가 재정을 이제 사용할 때가 됐습니다.
The size of this supplementary budget is 30.5 trillion Korean won, or a bit more than 22 billion US dollars. 15.2 trillion of that will be going into boosting the economy through stimulus. 5 trillion will be going to stabilizing people's livelihoods. 10.3 will be for revenue adjustment for the nation's fiscal situation. This means 20.2 trillion will be for direct spending by the government, with 19.8 trillion being debt. Going into the details, 15.2 trillion for economic stimulus will consist of 10.3 trillion of that being relief to everyone in a different form of the recipient's choosing. 1 trillion will go into boosting discounts and other needed aspects. 2.7 will go into support for the construction sector, as it's currently one of the hardest hit industries with close links to the employment of working-class citizens. President Lee has been pushing for cash relief to everyone for some time now since his lawmaker days. But then conservative government have been saying a universal payout is not right due to the financial pressure on the nation's fiscal status, and selective support is better.
만약 이제 일반 원칙으로요. 만약에 우리가 어떤 제도를 시행하는 데 필요한 경비다 이게라고 하면 그 경비 지출에 따라서 혜택을 보는 반사적 이익을 보는 사람은 누구여야 하느냐? 그건 가난한 사람이어야 하느냐? 아니면 세금을 많이 내는 부자여야 하느냐? 저는 어떤 필요에 의해서 경비를 지출한다고 하면 그 반사적 혜택은 최소한 국민들이 공평하게 혜택을 누리는 게 맞다고 생각해요.
The draft did go with a universal payout, but for those who need it, the more they will receive. The top 10%, approximately 5.12 million people, will receive a one-time payment of 150,000 Korean won, or around $100. And the biggest group of citizens of around 43 million people will receive the first payment of 150,000 Korean won, but will get an additional 100,000 in the second round. The lower levels will receive more in first-time payments, with the social welfare recipients later getting 500,000 in total. As for stabilizing livelihoods, money will be spent on debt relief for small businesses, as well as boosting employment and taming inflation. Now the ball is in the National Assembly's court, with the government's draft being transferred on the 23rd. Lawmakers will be reviewing the bill, but with the ruling Democratic Party holding the majority on the floor, the bill won't face many obstacles. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Rosé from Blackpink has made K-pop history with her song Apatu, becoming the longest charting K-pop song on the Billboard Hot 100. According to the latest chart released on Tuesday, Apatu entered week 34 on the Hot 100 at number 24, the same as the previous week. This breaks the previous K-pop record of 33 weeks set by Jimin of BTS with his track Who. Released in her collaboration with American pop star Bruno Mars, Apatu went viral for its addictive hook and its clever nod to a popular Korean drinking game. Many so-called overseas Koreans are spread across the world, and around 15% are said to be teenagers. To build a better connection with their motherland, some 200 students have visited the country. Our An Sung-jin covers their story.
7.5 million. That's how many overseas Koreans there are. Gathered here are around 240 next-generation overseas Koreans aged 15 to 18. This teen camp, hosted by the Overseas Korean Agency and organized by the Overseas Koreans Cooperation Center, has participants from 26 countries.
For these students, by visiting their parents' country, they can really feel their Korean heritage. Our ultimate goal is to increase the budget for such programs so we can invite more participants.
Especially as 2025 is the 80th anniversary of Korea's liberation, these students are delving into learning about their history and roots.
Programs like these offer the opportunity for overseas Koreans to experience Koreans' history, culture, and society while helping them build connection with younger people in the country.
For some, the 7-day program starts with a visit to Seodaemun Prison History Hall, which gives them a chance to understand Japan's colonial era and reflect on their background. For 15-year-old Sophia, this was an opportunity to fulfill her interests and ties with her Korean roots.
My grandmother was born in Korea, but it so happened that they were deported in train cars to Kazakhstan. Just in the cold, they were thrown like that. They started working at coal mines, and life began to improve for them. It's my first time in Korea, but I really like it here, and I will definitely come again in the future and maybe study here.
And at the National Museum of Korean Contemporary History, students look back at the country's past to strengthen ties and raise awareness of their Korean identity.
I know one of my great-grandfathers on my grandmother's side was a war veteran after the knock-on for the Korean military. I feel like it shows a lot of courage, and that courage is often seen throughout my family, I believe. That's one of the main reasons why I've come to Korea.
This program for the summer will run until August, not only for teens, but also for those aged up to 24 as well, to foster overseas Koreans as global leaders who embrace and uphold their Korean heritage. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Amid the rise of Korean culture, a festival kicked off in Seoul, drawing K-pop fans and content creators to international buyers. Byun Ye-young was there.
Korean culture isn't just about K-pop. Just as K-pop isn't only about singing and dancing. It's about storytelling, identity, and connection. Hallyu, or the Korean wave, has turned Korea's pop culture into a global bridge, uniting fans, industries, and ideas across borders. That is what the 2025 MyK Festa represents.
The Korean wave is having a strong impact on the world, but we shouldn't stop here.
we felt the need to find ways to connect it with other industries, like tourism and resource diplomacy. If we can grow together with our industries, I believe My K could become a key asset for Korea's future.
Where I'm standing right now is K Street, a sprawling exhibition and experience zone showcasing over 100 Korean companies. From webtoons and food to lifestyle brands, attendees can get a hands-on feel for K content and also everyday Korean culture, and do a little shopping along the way.
On K Street, there's something for everyone.
I think what I like the most is very diverse. I can see K-beauty booth, I can see K-fashion, K-pop, K-food. They also have like color analysis, so I really like going around and like seeing everything that Korea has to offer.
And I just attended with my friends so I could see all the different booths and kind of see what the sellers are offering. Yeah.
At the food zone, visitors can try food from popular brands that were carefully selected to reflect Korean food trends and appeal to foreigners as well.
K street food, like all the food trucks, it was so good. Like especially the tteokbokki. Like I love Korean food, so tteokbokki stood out like the most for me.
An export consultation event is also taking place, connecting Korean companies with foreign buyers, a move to open tangible new markets and build global networks.
I'm looking for some brandings and or looking at some products, anything, any business that is like matching together, and then it's a good thing for me also that I can look to Korea, local products, and also the entertainment as well. That is one thing that I feel like Korea is like #1 in Asia.
The first day also included a panel session to discuss music networking in Asia, and signed off with a K-pop concert headlined by K-pop group aespa. In the days to come, a global conference will bring together cultural industry leaders to discuss the future of Hallyu, alongside performances and a major closing concert, drawing the curtain on a festival that celebrates not just Korean content, but Korea's place on the world stage. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
And that is all we have for this weekend. Thank you so much for watching.